Massive blackout in Europe. What the hell happened? This Monday, Europe was plunged into unexpected chaos, leaving millions without power. Spain, Portugal, Andorra, and parts of France witnessed an unprecedented collapse that affected not only homes but also factories, hospitals, metro stations, and transportation systems. Within minutes, Europe's infrastructure, considered a pillar of global development, collapsed, exposing the vulnerabilities of an energy system reliant on a fragile balance. Although Spain's electrical grid has assured efforts are underway to restore power, the causes of the blackout remain unclear. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us until the end, because what you're about to hear may change the way you see global power. We'll now give you the details you need to understand what's really going on and stay one step ahead. This is News for Dummies, where we explain everything to foster your critical understanding of current events. How could something like this happen? A massive blackout has thrown several European countries into uncertainty. It's as if the 7 plagues were set on bringing Europeans to their knees. Let's look at the facts. This event triggered unprecedented shock across the continent, highlighting the growing fragility of an energy system that in the 21st century seems to wobble under any contingency. Spain, Andorra, Portugal, and France have been the main stages of this crisis, which plunged millions into darkness, especially those working in offices and factories without access to daylight. Even after several hours, the situation was not resolved, and it's possible that darkness may soon spread entirely across the affected nations. These countries were at the mercy of an electrical collapse that hit both large cities and small towns, overwhelming authorities and exposing the decay of infrastructure that still defines Europe as a world power. In Spain and Portugal, the situation was even more alarming, as their entire territories were left without power, a failure so complete it has raised countless unanswered questions. Meanwhile, emergency systems such as hospitals and traffic lights were quickly overwhelmed, clearly reflecting the region's vulnerability. Despite efforts by energy operators, the magnitude of the problem is such that full recovery could take between 6 and 10 hours. Yet uncertainty reigns. Spain's electrical grid reported that fluctuations in power flow disconnected the Spanish system from the European grid, a phenomenon so strange that experts say it had never occurred at such a scale. The hours after the blackout were chaotic. People trapped in elevators, stalled trains, and evacuated metro stations. President Pedro Sanchez's administration immediately called a crisis cabinet meeting, showing the impact of this event went far beyond a simple inconvenience. Citizens, already suffering from power failures, were also affected by the collapse of transport services, worsening the social crisis that followed. But how prepared is a continent that boasts economic, technological, and infrastructural power to face such a crisis? This massive blackout is not just a one-off energy failure but a reflection of a broader decay affecting Europe. Despite being a global benchmark for democracy and technology, Europe faces a structural fragility rarely seen so clearly. Systems meant to guarantee citizens' stability and safety have been shaken, revealing the inherent vulnerability of a system that, despite its efforts, has failed to shield itself against modern-day challenges. To make matters worse, the blackout's magnitude made it clear that Europe's energy infrastructure is not only outdated, but also dependent on a delicate balance that, when disturbed, leads to collapse. Hospitals and traffic lights affected by the outage underline the lack of investment in effective backup systems, revealing the poor preparedness of many institutions in handling emergencies like this. Images from Spain's capital Madrid and cities like Valencia and Barcelona without power were shared by thousands on social media, adding a touch of realism to a situation that already seemed like a dystopian movie. The blackout also highlights a pattern of disorder and lack of coordination, evident in how authorities responded. While Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez headed to the National Electric Grid's headquarters, officials in Brussels insisted there were no signs of cyber attacks or sabotage. However, the lack of clear answers and inability to provide swift solutions hinted at a failing state seemingly unable to manage events of this scale. Disorganization and uncertainty took over government actions, leaving millions adrift without clear answers on the causes or scope of the crisis. What does all this mean for Europe's confidence in its own power structures? The energy crisis has struck at the core of what defines European well-being. Electric security, a fundamental pillar of any modern nation, has been called into question, and citizens now face not only darkness but a landscape of uncertainty offering no comfort. As chaos unfolded, power restoration efforts, slow and challenging, were met with skepticism. While Europe considers itself one of the most developed regions on the planet, this crisis revealed the deep cracks in its governance and operational capacities. In a continent that has seen unprecedented technological progress, a simple blackout has exposed an uncomfortable truth. Europe is losing its grip on managing its own resources and future. Instead of being a region on the cutting edge, the blackout shows Europe's infrastructure is aging, and despite its wealth and power, it has failed to adapt to 21st century challenges. While the rest of the world moves forward, Europe is stuck in its own internal problems, where political struggles, lack of investment in renewable technologies, and corruption visibly affect citizens' quality of life. The massive blackout across several European countries is a painful reminder that the collapse of a system, no matter how advanced, can happen at any moment. This event not only left millions without power but also exposed the fragility of a continent long considered the global benchmark for development and stability. This massive blackout across Europe is more than a technical failure, it's a loud and clear warning. It exposed how fragile and outdated the continent's energy infrastructure has become. For decades, Europe has portrayed itself as the global benchmark in technology, governance, and social stability. But the reality unfolding today tells a different story, one of stagnation, vulnerability, and lack of preparedness. Hospitals, transportation systems, and emergency services were overwhelmed in minutes. Leaders scrambled without coordination. Citizens were left in the dark, both literally and figuratively. This unprecedented blackout across Europe has created clear winners and losers, as well as raised troubling questions about responsibility. Among those most harmed are ordinary citizens, millions left in the dark, vulnerable in hospitals, trapped in elevators, and stranded across transport networks. Businesses, too, have suffered significant economic losses, particularly factories and offices dependent on a constant power supply. Governments, especially in Spain and Portugal, appear weakened and disorganized, their lack of crisis preparedness now exposed to public scrutiny. The blackout also damaged the credibility of the European Union, whose promise of robust, interconnected infrastructure now rings hollow. On the other hand, those who stand to benefit are geopolitical rivals of the EU, nations like Russia or China, which may use this event to highlight Western decline and promote their own models of governance and energy independence. Renewable energy advocates might also find a new platform, pointing to this collapse as proof that current systems are unsustainable and outdated. As for who caused it, official sources deny cyber attacks or sabotage, yet the eerie silence and lack of explanation have only fueled suspicion. Was it a technical failure, a lapse in regulation, or the result of years of underinvestment? Regardless, the responsibility ultimately falls on European leadership for neglecting to modernize critical infrastructure in time. This event reveals a deeper crisis: the inability of modern European institutions to respond swiftly and effectively to emergencies. It forces us to ask, if Europe is this unprepared, what does that say about the future of the so-called developed world? Now it's your turn. If you found this analysis revealing, leave us a comment with your opinion on this crisis. Do you think this blackout signals the beginning of a larger collapse in Europe? Can the continent recover, or is this just the tip of the iceberg? Subscribe if you haven't already, because we'll be following the evolution of this story minute by minute. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next video, where we'll reveal how energy vulnerabilities could trigger a geopolitical domino effect.